Hi everybody, I'm Mike McCrory and this is Would You Make It? So I have a new tool being delivered today and I need to build a table to sit it on. I have the space cleared out, I've got the circuits run over here, and the materials are over there. So let's get started. My goal for this work table is that it be able to support a heavy load and not be subject to racking, so it has to be very rigid. I also want the table to be something that I can disassemble when needed. So I'm starting with 4-inch posts and I'm going to connect it all together with half-lap joints using 2x4s for the aprons and stretchers, the box stretchers at the bottom of the table, and I'll tighten it all together using threaded rods. Now I'm setting my dado blade to be 3/4 of an inch high. That's half the thickness of the 2x4. And I'm setting the fence to be 3.5 inches from the outside edge of the dado blade. That's the same thickness as the 2x4. And now I'll make the cuts on each leg. I'm making cuts on 3 sides, and each cut is the same, so there's only a single setup for all of these cuts. Next, I'll cut all of the 2x4s that are going to be used for the table apron and the stretchers. First, I'm cutting 4 68-inch pieces. These are going to be used for the apron at the top and the box stretchers at the bottom. Next, I'll cut 2 pieces that are 46.5 inches long. These are going to be used for the apron at each end of the table. And from the same 2x4s, I will cut 2 48-inch pieces, and these are used for the box stretchers at the bottom of the table. Next, I'll cut 2 45-inch pieces, and I'm doing that because I want to double up the apron at each end of the table. And similarly, I want to double up the apron along the sides of the table, so I'm cutting 2 61-inch pieces. And finally, 2 40-inch pieces because I'm going to have some supports under the tabletop that go from side to side. This will make a lot more sense when it starts to come together. Now I'm going to cut the half laps on each of the 2x4s. I'll start with the aprons along the sides and the ends of the table. These cuts are 2 3/4 of an inch long and 3/4 of an inch deep. And similarly, I'm cutting the aprons for the ends of the table, and these use the same setup on the table saw. Next, for the 2 boards that are 45 inches long, I'm going to cut a 2-inch half lap joint, and it's also 3/4 of an inch deep. For the box stretchers, these have a half lap joint that is 3.5 inches long and 3/4 of an inch deep. Now the box stretchers are going to intersect, so I'm raising my blade to be 1 3/4 of an inch high, and I will cut that intersecting joint. When I put it together, I realized I had made a mistake, and I didn't notice this on my SketchUp drawing, but there was actually a collision with the 2 boards. So I went back to the table saw and made an adjustment to the cut. To simplify the installation, I'm setting the box stretchers on some scrap 2x4s. That allows me to set the height without having to measure anything. A company called TechPo sent me this brushless drill as well as an impact driver. It's a 20-volt system, and asked me if I would give it a try on one of my videos. So I'm going to use it for this project. Actually, I'm going to use both of them for this project. So my tool just arrived from Laguna. I want to unpack it and bring it indoors because there's a tornado watch for tonight. So I finally broke down and got a CNC router. It's very heavy, it's about 425 pounds, so I've got a shop crane that I'm going to use to lift it off the pallet and then maneuver it into the workshop. I was only using a single strap, so it was a little difficult to balance, but I finally got it balanced enough that I could get it off the skid and wheeled into the workshop. Now back at the table, I want to cut a slot or a dado down through the table apron so that the threaded rod can fit into that slot. I did the same on the other piece, and when I get it to the table to assemble, I'm going to glue these two pieces together. After it's glued up, I will still be able to remove the threaded rod if needed. I'm using this sliding compound miter saw from Evolution Power Tools, and it can cut through almost anything with the blade that they supply. So I'm using this saw to cut the threaded rod. It cuts the rod pretty quickly and it gives a nice clean cut. After getting the side apron in place, then I'll double it up with the inside piece and glue them together. For the supporting members that are going to go across near the middle of the table, I'm also cutting a slot for the threaded rod. In this case, I'm not going to double them up, so it's going to be an open slot where the threaded rod can fit in. I didn't get the holes quite in the right place, so I needed to plane down the top a little bit. And now it's time to put on the top. This is 3/4 inch plywood. And I'm cutting it to be exactly 68 inches. Before screwing the top down, I'll square up the table apron and legs to the top of the table. For a light protective finish, I have an old can of tung oil with just enough in it that I can finish up on this tabletop. I let that dry overnight, and now it's time to lift the CNC router up and wheel it over to the table. I had to remove one of the stretchers at the bottom of the table so that I could wheel the crane under the table. Luckily, the table can be disassembled, so that was pretty easy to do. Without removing the stretcher on the other side, I'm not able to wheel the crane all the way under the table as far as I need. So I'm putting down a towel on each end underneath the CNC router so that when I lower it down, I'll be able to slide it across the table and position it in the center. And then I just used a little bit of leverage to get the towels out from underneath. And then I'll screw the stretcher back into the bottom. And I'll just use this little cabinet temporarily so that I have a place for the control unit to sit. So it's the next day, and I was able to get all the plywood relocated to another part of my shop, which is over by my table saw. So that allowed me to rotate the CNC router and the table into the proper position. I did that just by dragging it across the floor, which wasn't that difficult. That gives me much better access to the control unit. The only thing I have remaining is to add cabinets under the table, and I'm going to screw them into the box stretchers and into the apron. That will make it much more rigid, and it will give me a lot of tool storage so I can store router bits and routers and other tools that I have. It also gives me a place to store the bucket for the liquid cooling of the spindle. So I got to ask, would you make it?